The Alpha King thought they had sent him an ugly bride. Nora Ellison thought that was the safest thing he could believe. The veil was torn from her face before the wedding vow was finished. For one frozen second, the great hall of Crimson Citadel went silent. Then came the whispers. Nora stood beneath the high stone arches, with morning light pouring through the narrow windows, her hands locked around the stems of her white winter roses. Gray-black markings stretched from her temples across both cheeks, twisting over her pale skin like branches burned into glass. The sun veil was strong in daylight, strong enough to make strangers stare, strong enough to make some of them laugh.
"So, this is the bride Silver Creek sent their king?"
A nobleman murmured. Someone behind him gave a short, ugly chuckle. Nora kept her eyes on the dark stone floor. She had survived 8 years of whispers. She could survive one more room. What she had not expected was the man waiting 10 feet in front of her. Alpha King Gavin Hawthorne did not laugh. He stood beside the ceremonial moonstone in a black formal coat, broad-shouldered and perfectly still, his gray-blue eyes fixed on her face. Nora could not read them. Disgust would have been easier. Anger would have made sense. Silver Creek had failed its tribute. Now the old Moon Accord demanded a marriage to the nearest unmarried heir of its founding line. Nora had been sent because the treaty required her. Everyone in the hall knew it. Everyone also knew what they thought Marcus Ellison had done. He had given the Alpha King the woman nobody else would want. "Your Majesty," Celeste Warren said softly from the front row, her blonde hair shining beneath the chandeliers. "Perhaps the court should allow Lady Nora a moment to compose herself." Her tone sounded kind. Her eyes did not. Nora bent and picked up the fallen veil. Her fingers were steady, even if her heartbeat was not. She looked at Gavin for the first time. "If my face dishonors your throne, Your Majesty, release me!" The whisper stopped. Gavin studied her for a long moment. "Were you forced to come here?" Nora felt the question more sharply than the laughter. She could have lied. Marcus had taught her how to smile when she was afraid, and how to call duty a privilege, but Gavin was watching too closely. "Yes." A few people shifted uncomfortably. Gavin did not. "Do you wish to leave?" Nora's throat tightened. Outside these walls, 60 miles away, families in Silver Creek were counting sacks of grain that did not exist. Children were eating smaller meals. Winter was coming. If she walked away now, the crown could dissolve the agreement. Her freedom would have a price, and other people would pay it. Nora lifted her chin. "No." Gavin glanced toward Elias Mercer, the royal chancellor standing beside the treaty table. "The Moon Accord remains valid?" Elias nodded. "It does, Your Majesty." Gavin turned back to Nora. "Then the wedding continues." A ripple moved through the hall. Someone laughed again, quieter this time. Gavin's head turned. The sound died instantly. "You find something amusing?" he asked. No one answered. His voice never rose. It did not need to. "Lady Nora entered this hall under crown protection. She stands here as my lawful bride. Anyone who humiliates her humiliates this throne." The room became so quiet, Nora could hear the soft crackle of the fires along the walls. Gavin stepped down from the moonstone and stopped beside her. Not in front of her. Beside her. "Put the veil away," he said. Nora looked at him, startled. "Your Majesty?" His gaze moved once across the faces of the watching court, then returned to hers. You should not have to hide because they have forgotten their manners. Something inside Nora shifted. Not trust. Not yet. But the first small crack in the certainty she had carried all the way from Silver Creek. Perhaps the feared Alpha King was not the cruelest person in this room. Elias resumed the ceremony. Nora spoke her vows. Gavin spoke his. And when the final blessing was given, he offered her his hand without touching her first. Nora hesitated, then placed her fingers in his palm. His hand was warm. His expression changed almost imperceptibly. Somewhere behind his eyes, something sharpened. Gavin inhaled once, as if he had caught the faintest trace of a scent that should not have been there. Nora did not notice. She was looking toward the windows. Morning sunlight still filled the hall. Sunset was hours away, and Gavin Hawthorne still had no idea that the woman he had just married would not look the same when darkness came. By noon, Nora had learned one thing about Crimson Citadel. There were too many windows. Sunlight followed her everywhere. It crossed the marble floors of the Queen's Wing, spilled over the carved doors, and touched her face whenever she passed an open archway. She kept her expression calm as a royal attendant led her toward the rooms prepared for her. 8 years ago, sunlight had meant warmth. Then she turned 16. The first mark appeared on an ordinary spring morning. Nora had been standing before the mirror in her room at Silver Creek when a thin gray line formed beside her left temple. She rubbed at it until her skin turned red. The mark did not move. By breakfast, more had appeared. By afternoon, dark branches covered both cheeks. Marcus Ellison had stared at her as if she had brought something dangerous into his house. Do not let anyone see you, he had said. Nora still remembered the weight of his hand on the door and the black stone ring on his right index finger as he turned the key. That night, something stranger happened. The sun disappeared behind the hills. Nora felt a cool sensation move across her face. She looked into the mirror and froze. The markings were gone. The roughness was gone. Even the strange distortion that made her features look uneven had vanished. She looked exactly as she remembered herself before that morning. When Marcus entered and saw her, fear flashed across his face. Real fear. He crossed the room, closed the curtains, and told her the words that shaped the next 8 years. You are cursed, Nora had whispered. Can it be removed? Marcus had looked away. Not safely. He told her that people feared unexplained magic, that they might call her a witch, that someone might drag her before a tribunal if they saw her change after dark. Nora had believed him because she had already lost both parents. Her father, Thomas, had died when she was 10. Her mother, Evelyn, had died 2 years later after a fever swept through the valley. Marcus was family. He became guardian, regent, and the man who decided what was safe. So Nora learned the rules. During the day, she could work quietly around the estate. Before sunset, she returned to the East Wing. The doors were locked. The curtains were drawn. No servants were allowed inside until morning. At first, she cried. Later, she stopped. There was no use grieving for a face no one was allowed to see. The only thing she kept from her mother was a silver pendant shaped like a crescent moon surrounded by thorns. Evelyn had pressed it into Nora's palm near the end of her illness. Never let them convince you that the face the world sees is the measure of you. Nora had been 12. She had not understood. Now, standing inside the Queen's wing of Crimson Citadel, she touched that same pendant beneath the collar of her wedding dress. The attendant opened a pair of carved doors. "These are your chambers, Lady Nora." The suite was larger than the entire East Wing room where Marcus had kept her at night. Tall windows faced west. Nora stopped breathing for half a second. West, directly toward the setting sun. "Is something wrong?" the attendant asked. "No." Nora forced her hand away from the pendant. "Nothing is wrong." The woman smiled politely and withdrew. Nora waited until the door closed. Then she crossed the room and pulled one curtain shut, then another. Her hands moved faster with each window. By the time the last strip of sunlight disappeared, her pulse had begun to settle. She leaned against the heavy fabric and closed her eyes. She had survived the wedding. She had survived the laughter. Gavin Hawthorne had not sent her away. That should have made the rest easier. Instead, a memory returned. 3 mornings before Nora left Silver Creek, Marcus had stood beside her carriage while servants loaded the final trunk. The black stone ring had gleamed on his right hand as he adjusted his glove.
You will obey the king, he had said. You will not cause questions, and above all, you will keep your condition hidden.
Nora had asked him what would happen if Gavin discovered it. Marcus had gone still. Then he gave her an answer she had never forgotten. Make sure he does not. At the time, Nora thought he was protecting her. Now she remembered the look in his eyes. It had not been concern. It had been urgency. A knock sounded at her chamber door. Nora straightened. Outside, a servant announced that Alpha King Gavin had requested her presence in the royal study. Nora glanced toward the covered windows. It was still early afternoon. There were hours of daylight left. She opened the door and followed the servant into the corridor, unaware that far behind her, through a narrow gap she had missed in one curtain, a thin blade of sunlight was already moving slowly across the floor toward the place where evening would eventually find her. Nora entered the royal study expecting another ceremony. Instead, she found Gavin Hawthorne standing beside a long oak table covered with maps, sealed documents, and a single open ledger. Afternoon light fell through the tall windows behind him, bright enough to make the gray markings on her face feel even more exposed. She resisted the urge to turn away. Gavin looked up when the door closed behind her.
Sit, if you wish.
Nora remained standing. I am comfortable. His gaze lingered on her for a moment, not with mockery, not even with curiosity. He seemed to be measuring the distance between what he had been told and the woman in front of him.
Then I will be direct,
he said.
This marriage exists because of the moon accord. I will not pretend otherwise.
Nora had expected something colder, perhaps a list of duties, perhaps a warning. She folded her hands in front of her. Neither will I. Gavin moved one document aside. You will have your own chambers, your own staff. You may attend court functions when required, but you will not be ordered into private company you do not want. Nora blinked. I do not understand. You do not owe me affection because a treaty put my name beside yours. His voice stayed even. You do not owe me closeness. You do not owe me anything that was not freely given. For the first time that day, Nora forgot about the markings on her face. Marcus had spent years teaching her that duty meant obedience. Gavin was describing something else entirely. A boundary, a choice. She looked at him more carefully. Then, what do you expect from me? Honesty where the crown is concerned. Public cooperation when the treaty requires it. Nothing more than that, without your agreement. Nora let out a breath she had not realized she was holding. Gavin turned to the ledger. Now tell me what you want. The question caught her off guard. She glanced at the room as if the answer might be hidden somewhere among the maps. What I want? You married a stranger to keep Silver Creek under crown protection. There must be something you expect in return. Jewelry would have been easy. New dresses, a private carriage, a household allowance. Those were the things people assumed women wanted when they stood close to a throne. Nora thought instead of the kitchens back home. Flour stretched too thin. Soup watered down. Children pretending they were not hungry because their parents already knew. When will the grain wagons leave? Gavin went still. Tomorrow morning. Nora shook her head. Tonight. His expression changed by barely a fraction. The road is 60 miles. I know. The wagons will need 2 days. I know that too. She met his eyes, which is why morning is too late. The room fell quiet. Nora expected him to remind her that she was asking too much. Marcus would have. Marcus always had a reason why mercy needed to wait. Gavin only looked toward the door. Elias. The royal chancellor entered almost immediately, carrying a leather folder beneath one arm. Gavin pointed to the ledger. Release the first grain convoy before sunset. Add 2 more wagons of preserved food. Elias paused. Your Majesty, the quartermaster's scheduled departure for dawn. Then change the schedule. Yes, Your Majesty. Nora stared at him. You do not have to add more. Gavin looked back at her. You asked what you wanted. I heard you. Something warm pressed unexpectedly against Nora's ribs. Not affection, not trust. But relief had a way of slipping past defenses before pride could stop it. She lowered her gaze. Thank you. Gavin gave a small nod, as though gratitude embarrassed him more than command ever could. By late afternoon, Nora stood beneath the gatehouse arch as the first covered wagons rolled onto the royal road. Wooden wheels creaked over stone. Drivers called to one another. The royal wolf crest gleamed on the wagon doors. For the first time since leaving Silver Creek, Nora felt that her sacrifice had produced something real. Bread, food, time. Gavin stood several feet behind her, speaking quietly with Elias. Nora did not hear the words. She only knew that when she finally turned and walked back toward the citadel, Gavin's attention followed her. A few seconds later, his wolf stirred beneath his skin. Not with anger, not with hunger, with recognition too faint to name. Gavin inhaled slowly. The air held smoke from the kitchens, cold stone, horses from the yard, and something else. Something soft. Rain on pine. Wildflowers after dusk. He looked toward Nora as she disappeared through the inner doors. The scent was already fading, but his wolf did not settle. It wanted him to follow. By the second morning, Nora had discovered that kindness traveled through Crimson Citadel faster than gossip. A kitchen maid she had never met left warm tea outside her door. An elderly servant bowed to her with genuine respect, instead of the careful politeness reserved for unwanted royalty. Even the guards at the Queen's Wing seemed less stiff when she passed. Nora knew why. The grain convoy had left before sunset, and word had spread that the new bride had asked for food before Jules. Celeste Warren noticed too. At the midday meal, she sat across from Nora in a pale blue gown, surrounded by women whose beauty seemed chosen to make Nora feel unfinished. "Crimson Citadel must seem overwhelming after Silver Creek," Celeste said. "So many expectations, so many eyes." Nora lifted her cup. "I have noticed the eyes." A few women hid smiles. Celeste leaned closer. "Court can be cruel to anyone who gives it a reason." Nora met her gaze. "Then I suppose kindness must feel very inconvenient here." The table fell quiet. Celeste smiled, but the warmth vanished from it. Later that afternoon, Nora crossed the West Gallery and saw a royal courier place a sealed letter into Celeste's hand. Nora recognized the silver wolf stamped into the wax. Silver Creek. Celeste immediately slipped the letter into a dark lacquer correspondence box and closed the lid. Nora slowed for half a step, then kept walking. She had no reason to accuse anyone of anything. Not yet. The next day brought colder weather and better news. Elias Mercer informed Nora that the grain wagons had reached Silver Creek before nightfall. 2 full days after leaving Crimson Citadel. Right on schedule. Nora read the confirmation twice before pressing the page against her chest. Her people would eat. For the first time since the wedding, something inside her loosened. She carried that feeling into the inner bailey until a sudden commotion near the royal stables stopped her. A young stable boy stood frozen beside an open stall. Inside, Gavin's charcoal warhorse paced in tight circles, ears pinned back, breath coming fast. "He has been restless since dawn," the stable master said. "No one can get close enough to calm him." Nora watched the animal strike the ground with one hoof. Fear, not aggression. She knew that look. "May I try?" The stable master stared at her gray-marked face, then toward the men gathered nearby. Before he could answer, Gavin's voice came from behind them. "Let her." Nora turned. Gavin stood near the stable doors with Elias, his expression unreadable. She entered slowly. No sudden movement, no command. She stopped several feet from the horse and lowered her hand. "Easy," she whispered. "No one is asking anything from you." The horse watched her. Nora breathed slowly. Once, twice. Then the animal stepped forward. Its nose touched her palm. The tension left its neck. Within moments, the stall was quiet. Nora stroked the horse between the eyes. "There you are." When she stepped back outside, the stable master looked stunned. Gavin did not. He looked thoughtful. "You have done that before." "With frightened animals." "And people?" Nora hesitated. "Sometimes frightened people are not very different." Something almost like amusement touched Gavin's face. "I will remember that." Nora walked away before he could see how much the answer affected her. Gavin remained beside the stall. His wolf had been agitated all morning. Now it was silent, calm. He watched Nora cross the bailey, chestnut hair moving in the cold breeze, gray markings visible in the afternoon light. Then the faint scent returned. Rain, pine, wildflowers, stronger than before. Gavin drew a slow breath. His wolf lifted its head, not toward the horse, toward Nora. Across the courtyard, Celeste watched Gavin watching his wife. Her fingers tightened around the handle of the dark lacquer box she carried beneath one arm. And as Nora disappeared into the Queen's wing, she glanced toward the lowering sun, unaware that Celeste had just decided she could no longer afford to wait. By late afternoon on the 4th day, Nora had begun to recognize the sound of trouble before it reached her door. It arrived politely. A soft knock, a servant carrying a polished wooden chest tied with silver ribbon. "A gift from House Warren, my lady." Nora looked at the crest pressed into the wax tag. "Celeste." "Set it near the wardrobe." The servant obeyed and left. Nora did not open it. She had learned enough about court kindness to know that some gifts came with teeth hidden beneath the ribbon. Outside the tall windows, the sun had already begun its slow descent. Less than an hour remained before sunset. Nora crossed the room and checked the curtains twice. Her hands were steady, but her thoughts were not. Every evening at Crimson Citadel had become a careful race against the light. Lock the door. Dismiss the servants. Close the curtains. Wait until the sun veil faded. Then wait again for morning to put the false face back in place. She was fastening the last curtain when another knock came. Harder this time. "Lady Nora." It was Gavin. Her heartbeat changed. "One moment." She checked the room. Nothing unusual. Then she opened the door. Gavin stood alone. No guards. No Elias. His expression was calm, but he held a folded piece of paper in one hand and a dark wool cloak over the other arm. Nora stared at the cloak. "What is that?" "I hoped you could tell me." He stepped inside only after she moved aside. Nora looked toward the wardrobe. The gift chest from Celeste sat untouched near it. Gavin placed the cloak on the back of a chair. "This was found in your room 20 minutes ago. I have never seen it." He handed her the paper. The message contained only a few lines. It claimed that Nora received a man in secret after sundown, that she dismissed her servants to hide him, that the king was being made a fool in his own palace. Nora read it once, then again. The room suddenly felt smaller. "You believe this?" Gavin watched her face. "I came here instead of taking it to the council." That was not an answer. Nora folded the note carefully. "No man has been in these rooms. Why do you dismiss everyone before sunset?" Her fingers tightened around the paper. There it was. Not the accusation she feared. The real question. Nora glanced at the western curtains, a thin red glow pressed around their edges. "I prefer privacy." Gavin's gaze moved to the closed windows, then back to her. "Every night?" "Yes." "At exactly the same time?" Nora said nothing. Gavin did not raise his voice. "The cloak is not enough to prove anything. The note is anonymous. The delivery records show that a House Warren chest entered this room today, so I have already ordered the servants questioned." Nora looked toward the polished chest. Her stomach turned cold. Celeste. Of course. "I did not open it." "I know." Nora looked at him sharply. Gavin continued. "The ribbon is still sealed." My ticketing, see. Relief came first, then fear, much worse than before, because Gavin was not accusing her anymore. He was studying her. "Then why are you here?" she asked. "Because the story is false, but something else is not." The last sunlight deepened from gold to red along the curtain seam. Nora could feel the change before she saw it. A faint coolness beneath the skin of her cheeks. Too soon. "You need to leave." Gavin frowned. "Nora, please." She moved toward the door and opened it. "Whatever you think this is, we can speak tomorrow." He did not move. "You are frightened?" "I am not." The lie came too quickly. Gavin looked toward the windows. "You were calm when half my court laughed at you." You were calm when you crossed a stable toward a frightened warhorse. But now the sun is setting, and you can barely stand still." Nora's breath caught. The gray markings on her face had begun to cool. She could feel the sun veil weakening. "Gavin." It was the first time she had used his name without a title. He noticed. So did she. "Please leave before the sun goes down." Silence filled the room. Gavin looked at her as if every answer he had been given since the wedding had just become a question. Outside, the final edge of the sun touched the horizon. Nora stepped backward. The coolness spread across her cheeks, and for the first time in 8 years, someone was still standing in the room when the change began. The last line of sunlight vanished, and Nora stopped breathing. Gavin saw the change begin at her temples. The gray markings did not tear away or burn. They simply softened, faded, thinned, like ink dissolving in clear water. Nora stood perfectly still near the window, one hand gripping the edge of the curtain as the strange roughness across her cheeks disappeared with the light. Her skin smoothed. The false unevenness faded. Her features settled into the face that had been hidden from daylight for 8 years. Gavin did not speak. Nora forced herself to look at him. That silence frightened her more than laughter ever had. His gray-blue eyes moved across her face, stunned but controlled. She knew what he saw now. Chestnut hair, green eyes, pale skin untouched by the strange markings. The woman Marcus had ordered her to hide every night since she was 16. Nora swallowed. "Now you understand." Gavin remained where he was. "Understand what?" "Why they kept me hidden." Her voice tightened. "Why Marcus told me never to let anyone see what happens after sunset." Gavin took one slow breath. "You thought I would send you away if I knew?" Nora gave a quiet, humorless laugh. "No, I thought you might want me after you knew." That answer struck him harder than she expected. She looked away before he could respond. "There is a difference." The room had grown darker, but Nora did not reach for a lamp. She had spent too many years living these hours alone. "This morning, you looked at a woman your court called ugly. You treated her with dignity. If you change now, how am I supposed to know which woman you are choosing?" Gavin stepped closer, then stopped several feet away. He did not touch her. "I noticed you before this." Nora looked back at him. "You noticed a problem your court created?" "I noticed the woman who stood in front of them and refused to beg." His voice was quiet. "I noticed the woman who sent grain away before she asked for anything for herself. I noticed the woman who walked toward a frightened animal when everyone else stepped back." Nora said nothing. Gavin continued. "Whatever changed when the sun went down did not create those things." Yeah, something in her chest loosened, but fear remained. It had lived there too long to disappear in one conversation. Then Gavin went still. His expression sharpened. His wolf surged beneath his control so suddenly that he had to brace one hand against the back of a chair. Nora felt it too. Not pain, pressure, recognition. The faint scent he had noticed at the gatehouse and near the stables now filled the room without obstruction. Rain on pine. Wildflowers after dusk. Warm earth after summer thunder. Gavin stared at her. His wolf gave him one clear answer. Mate. Nora saw the realization in his face. "What is it?" Gavin did not answer immediately. He was fighting instinct with discipline, refusing to let something ancient decide the conversation for him. "My wolf recognizes you." Nora's eyes widened. "As what?" He held her gaze. "My mate." Silence settled between them. Nora took one step back. Gavin did not follow. "That does not mean you owe me anything," he said at once. "A bond is not consent." Nora searched his face, almost suspicious of how quickly he understood what she feared. Then her hand rose unconsciously to the silver pendant at her throat. The crescent moon, surrounded by thorns, caught the faint firelight from the hall beyond the door. Gavin's eyes dropped to it. His expression changed again. "Where did you get that?" Nora touched the pendant. "My mother." "What was her name?" "Evelyn Vale." Gavin stared at the symbol. Something old surfaced in his memory. A crest carved into the spine of a sealed genealogy volume beneath the west wing. A bloodline most people believed had disappeared generations ago. Nora watched him carefully. "You know this symbol." Gavin looked toward the door, then back at her. "I have seen it before." Her heartbeat quickened. "Where?" He answered without hesitation. "In the Royal Archives." Nora lowered her eyes to the pendant she had worn since she was 12. For years, she had believed it was only the last thing her mother had left behind. Now Gavin was looking at it as if it belonged to a history neither of them understood. Outside, night settled over Crimson Citadel, and for the first time, Nora began to wonder whether the face hidden by the sunveil was only the smallest secret Marcus had kept from her. Nora had spent 8 years believing the worst secret in her life was her face. By midnight, she learned it was not even close. The Royal Archives lay beneath the west wing of Crimson Citadel, behind 2 iron-bound doors and a staircase worn smooth by generations of kings. Elias Mercer met them there with a ring of keys and a lamp in one hand. He looked from Gavin to Nora, then to the silver pendant resting against her chest. "You are certain about the crest?" Gavin asked. Elias nodded. "I have seen it in the old blood registries, not recently." The doors opened with a low groan. Dust, leather, and cold stone filled the air. Nora followed Gavin between shelves stacked higher than she could reach. She had returned to her true appearance after sunset, but for once, that was not what occupied her mind. "Mate." The words still echoed inside her. Gavin had not touched her. He had not claimed anything. He had simply told her the truth and given her space to breathe. That restraint made it harder to dismiss what she felt around him. Elias pulled down a thick genealogy volume and placed it on a reading table. Gavin opened it carefully. Near the center was the same symbol Nora had worn since childhood, a crescent moon surrounded by thorns. Beneath it were several names. One stopped her breath. Evelyn Vale. Nora pressed both hands to the table. "My mother." Elias traced the record with one finger. Evelyn Vale was a direct descendant of the Moonborn line. Nora stared at him. "Marcus never told me." "There's more," Gavin said. A second ledger held Silver Creek succession records. Thomas Ellison came before Marcus, and after Thomas, written in dark ink that had faded only slightly with age, was Nora Ellison. She read the line twice. "That cannot be right." Elias looked at her steadily. It is legally clear. Your father was first in succession. After his death, the right passed to you. Marcus was appointed regent because you were a child. Nora felt the room tilt beneath her.
He was supposed to give it back. When you came of age,
Elias said. Her hands went cold. Suddenly, every locked door in Silver Creek looked different in her memory. Every warning, every rule, every time Marcus had told her she should be grateful he was protecting her. Gavin closed the ledger slowly. He did not hide you because you were powerless. Nora looked at him. He hid me because I was not. The next book was smaller, older, bound in cracked gray leather. Elias hesitated before opening it. This is a restricted curse index. Gavin nodded once. Elias turned several pages until he found an illustration of a black stone set into a silver ring. Nora stopped breathing. I know that ring. Gavin looked at her. Marcus? Right index finger. He has worn it since I was 16. The text named the spell. The sun veil. A blood-linked glamour anchored to black sunstone. Daylight strengthened it. Sunset weakened it. It distorted appearance, suppressed moonborn traits, and dulled mate scent without destroying the bond itself. Nora read the final section aloud, her voice barely above a whisper. The anchor may be broken only by the cursed person upon consecrated moonstone during twilight, when the veil stands between strength and sleep. Gavin's eyes met hers. The moonstone in the great hall? Nora nodded. For the first time, the curse had rules. Rules meant an ending was possible. Then Elias brought out one more volume, a Moonborn Chronicle. Near the margin, a single line had been preserved in older script. Before the moon is seen, the wolf shall know the air the sun has veiled. Gavin went still. Nora remembered the gatehouse, the stables, the way he had watched her before he had ever seen her after dark. The prophecy had not created anything. It had simply described what had already happened. A sharp knock sounded at the archive door. A royal clerk entered and handed Elias a sealed document. Gavin read it first. His expression hardened. The search order was executed. Less than an hour later, the dark lacquer box from Celeste Warren's rooms sat on the archive table. Inside were letters bearing the Silver Creek seal. Nora recognized Marcus's formal handwriting immediately. One letter discussed the marriage. Another discussed the false cloak. Then Gavin unfolded the last page. Nora saw one sentence before he could turn it toward her. The daylight veil must remain intact until the king rejects her. Silence filled the archive. Nora no longer felt confused. She felt clear. Marcus had not sent her away because she was unwanted. He had sent her because the treaty forced his hand, then planned to make sure she came back disgraced and powerless. Gavin pushed back from the table. I will have him arrested before sunrise. No. Nora's answer came so quickly that even Elias looked surprised. Gavin studied her. Nora. She closed the letter and placed it beside her mother's name. He taught everyone to judge me in public. He took my inheritance in public. He made my shame useful to him. Her voice was calm now. Tomorrow, the Council of Pax meets in the Great Hall. Gavin understood before she finished. Nora touched the pendant at her throat, then looked toward the black sky beyond the archive windows. Let him come wearing the ring. Let Celeste come believing I still know nothing. For the first time in years, Nora was not waiting for sunset to hide her. She was waiting for daylight, because when the sun began to fall tomorrow, Marcus Ellison would finally learn what happened when the woman he tried to erase stood in front of the entire kingdom and refused to disappear. By late afternoon, every seat in the Great Hall was filled. The Council of Pax had come to ratify the Moon Accord, confirm Silver Creek's protection, and recognize the royal marriage. Nora stood at Gavin's right beneath the tall western windows, daylight still bright across her face. The sun veil was fully awake. Gray markings covered both cheeks. Her features carried the same distortion the court had mocked on the morning of her wedding. She had chosen to appear exactly this way. Across the hall, Marcus Ellison watched her with practiced concern. The black sunstone ring rested on his right index finger. Celeste Warren stood several places away, elegant in pale silver, her expression calm enough to fool anyone who had not read the letters hidden in her lacquer box. Elias Mercer opened the session. The Crown recognizes Nora Ellison as lawful bride under the Moon Accord. Marcus lifted one hand. Your Majesty, before this council proceeds, I must speak for Silver Creek. Nora felt Gavin shift beside her, but he did not interrupt. This was her plan. Marcus faced the gathered alphas. My niece has always been troubled. Her condition has made her confused, unstable, and easily influenced. A murmur moved through the hall. Celeste lowered her eyes as if embarrassed for Nora. Marcus continued. I fear the Crown has been deceived. Nora stepped forward. Then let us discuss deception. Marcus froze. Elias placed the first registry on the ceremonial table. Nora opened it herself. Thomas Ellison stood before Marcus in the Silver Creek succession line. Thomas was my father. After his death, the right passed to his only child. She looked directly at Marcus. Me. The hall went quiet. Marcus smiled tightly. Old records are often misunderstood. Elias? Nora asked. The Chancellor stepped forward. The record is valid. Marcus Ellison was appointed regent while Lady Nora was a minor. The office did not replace her inheritance. The first crack appeared in Marcus's composure. Nora placed her mother's genealogy beside the registry. Evelyn Vale was moon-born. This time, the reaction was louder. Marcus's hand moved toward his ring. Nora noticed. So did Gavin. Celeste spoke quickly. Even if that is true, it proves nothing about the accusations surrounding her conduct in this palace. Nora turned toward her. You mean the cloak? Elias placed the dark wool cloak on the table. Beside it went the anonymous accusation and the palace delivery record. The chest in which the cloak entered Lady Nora's rooms was registered to House Warren, he said. Celeste's face lost color. Nora added the final evidence, letters, Silver Creek seals, Marcus's handwriting. Celeste's replies. Gavin had not needed to accuse them. Their own words did it. Marcus stepped forward. Forgery. Then explain this, Nora said. She read one line aloud. The daylight veil must remain intact until the king rejects her. Marcus said nothing. Nora's eyes dropped to his right hand. And perhaps you should explain the ring. Instinctively, Marcus covered it. Too late. Elias opened the curse index to the marked page. The illustration matched the black sunstone exactly. Marcus looked around the hall and saw the moment control left him. His voice sharpened. Look at her. She has always been deformed. She was never fit to rule Silver Creek, much less stand beside a king. The words landed in a silence deeper than laughter. Nora did not lower her head. She did not look at Gavin for rescue. You spent 8 years making sure the world saw what you wanted it to see. Marcus scoffed. And what exactly do you think they see now? Gavin rose from the throne. The sun had not yet touched the horizon. The curse still covered Nora's face. Every gray mark remained. He descended the steps and stopped beside her. Not in front of her. Beside her. They see my wife. Marcus stared at him. Gavin's voice carried through the hall. They see my mate. Nora's breath caught. He had never said it publicly before. Gavin looked at the council, then at her. And they see the woman I intend to recognize as Luna. Only then did the first edge of the sun touch the distant hills. Coolness spread across Nora's cheeks. The gray markings began to fade. Gasps moved through the hall as the sun veil weakened in front of hundreds of witnesses. Nora's true features emerged slowly into the amber light. Celeste stared. Marcus backed away from the moonstone table, but royal guards quietly blocked his path. No struggle, no spectacle, just nowhere left to run. Nora walked toward him. The ring! Marcus held his hand against his chest. Gavin could have ordered it taken. He did not. Nora met her uncle's eyes. You controlled enough of my life. Marcus looked around the hall. No one defended him. Slowly, he removed the black sunstone ring and placed it in Nora's palm. The stone felt cold, heavier than it looked. Nora carried it to the ceremonial moonstone where she had spoken her wedding vows 4 days earlier. Twilight filled the windows. She placed the ring against the pale surface and pressed down with both hands. A single crack broke the silence. The black stone split. Nothing exploded. No light flooded the hall. Nora only felt a pressure she had carried for 8 years suddenly disappear. She closed her eyes. For once, sunset did not reveal a secret. It ended one. When Nora opened her eyes again, Gavin was waiting a few feet away, giving her the choice to cross the distance herself. She did. But even as the council bowed and Marcus and Celeste were placed under lawful arrest, one question remained unanswered. The sun veil had always returned with morning. Tomorrow, Nora would stand in the sunrise and learn whether she had truly broken the curse forever, and whether the king who had chosen her before sunset would still give her the freedom to choose him in return. At sunrise, Nora stood alone before the western mirror and waited for the face she had feared for 8 years to return. Morning light slipped across the floor of the queen's wing, climbed the hem of her gown, and finally touched her cheeks. Nora closed her eyes. One breath, then another. Nothing happened. No cold pressure beneath her skin. No gray lines spreading from her temples. No familiar distortion pulling her reflection away from the woman she remembered. She opened her eyes slowly. The face in the mirror was still hers. Nora lifted trembling fingers to her cheek. A laugh escaped her before she could stop it, followed by tears she had promised herself she would not shed. She was not crying because she was beautiful. She was crying because morning could no longer frighten her. A soft knock came at the door. Nora? Gavin. She wiped her eyes and opened it. He took one look at her face in the full daylight and understood. It is gone. Nora nodded. It is gone. Relief moved across his expression, but he did not reach for her. He had kept that promise from the beginning. Choice first, always. "There is something else," he said. In the royal study, Elias Mercer waited beside two documents. Gavin placed the first before Nora. "This releases you from the marriage obligations of the Moon Accord." Nora stared at him. "You are ending our marriage?" "I am ending the part you never chose." He placed the second document beside it. "Silver Creek will remain under Crown protection, whether you stay here or leave. The grain shipments will continue through winter. Your people will not pay for your decision." Nora looked from the papers to Gavin. "Why?" His answer came quietly. "Because if you stay, I need to know you stayed for yourself." For several seconds, Nora could not speak. This man could have hidden the document. He could have used the mate bond, the treaty, or her concern for Silver Creek to keep her beside him. Instead, he had removed every chain she had left. Nora picked up the release. Gavin watched without moving. She tore it once through the center, then again. His eyes widened. "Marcus forced me to come here," she said. "The Moon Accord forced me to marry a king." She stepped closer. "But no one is forcing me to stay with Gavin Hawthorne." For the first time since their wedding, his controlled expression broke into a real smile. Nora held out her hand. Gavin took it only after she offered it. 3 weeks later, Crimson Citadel gathered again. Marcus Ellison had been formally convicted of succession fraud, unlawful curse magic, and conspiracy against the crown. Celeste Warren had been convicted of fabricating evidence and interfering with the royal treaty. Neither controlled Nora's future anymore. Silver Creek recognized Nora as its lawful heir, and she established a local council so no single regent could ever hold the pack the way Marcus had. Then came the coronation. Nora chose sunrise. The great hall filled with gold as she entered without a veil. The same nobles who had once whispered now stood in silence. Gavin waited beside two thrones placed at equal height. When Nora reached him, he took her hand. "I did not choose the woman sunset revealed," he said. His gaze never left hers. "I chose the woman I married at dawn." Nora accepted the mate bond freely, not because prophecy demanded it, not because a treaty required it, but because trust had become love, one honest choice at a time. Together, they stepped toward the balcony as morning spread across the northern packs. No curse, no hidden face, no debt left unpaid. Nora finally stood in the light without wondering who she needed to become to deserve it. Maybe that is the heart of this story. Real love does not wait for someone to become beautiful, powerful, or approved by everyone else. It sees character first. What would you have done in Nora's place? Share your thoughts in the comments and subscribe if you believe the best stories leave us seeing people differently.